This AEW star is teasing a gimmick change. I'm going to tell you guys why I think it is absolutely a good idea, despite the fact that it's random and it's weird. Also, we got to talk a little bit about WWE doing gimmick changes versus AEW, because I feel like AEW could be doing this for a whole different reason. And I think this is what makes AEW such a viable option in pro wrestling. So, guys, Matt Hardy is teasing a gimmick change. Now, Matt Hardy it doesn't matter what he changes his gimmick to. Matt Hardy is over. Whether he's Broken, Woken, Hardy Boy Matt, or even HFO Matt, Matt Hardy is going to be over regardless. But we look at WWE and they're doing a gimmick change with Elias. And it's a very questionable gimmick change because with Elias, he didn't really need a gimmick change. He was over as is, and he probably would have got even more over if WWE actually continued booking him. See, Walk with Elias used to be a really big deal in WWE, just like Rusev Day. But then, of course, WWE, with no plans, basically killed something that could have been so great. So now Elias is being given a gimmick change in WWE. And honestly, historically in wrestling, a gimmick change is used when you can't get over. Elias was able to get over, and WWE ruined it, and now they're changing it. Matt Hardy typically does gimmick changes just to freshen up his character and do fresh things and different storylines. But right now, as it stands, I think there is more benefit from Matt Hardy turning heel against his group. Having him turn heel against his faction is going to be a little bit better than Matt Hardy being the leader of this faction. So when Matt Hardy says he is gearing towards more Matt Hardy, something that's real, more authentic, I actually believe that this is going to lead to something that's very unauthentic, right? The belief is that Matt Hardy's a nice guy and stuff like that. But imagine if Matt Hardy becomes this manager or this leader of HFO that essentially just scams everybody and then starts feuding with them. Because right now, as it stands, I don't feel like the faction is doing anything fantastic. I don't feel like, you got TH2, you got all these different groups and all these different people, but nobody's really getting anything out of it other than being associated with Matt Hardy. So what if you have Matt Hardy change his gimmick, not because he can't get over, but for the idea of getting other people over? And that's where I think AEW does things better than WWE. AEW can have Matt Hardy change his gimmick slightly, do this gimmick change, and use this to benefit the people that he's with. Because as it stands right now, I don't feel like there's a real benefit to what they're doing. I'm not saying I don't enjoy what they're doing. I'm just saying I don't really see anybody getting a benefit from them. So with Matt Hardy changing his gimmick, that tells me there is an opportunity here to get something for these people that are associated with him. Because keep in mind, he's taking a percentage of all their business. Now, what if Matt Hardy becomes a prick? And now this leads to a very big split. And then you got everybody fighting and a whole bunch of chaos. Again, you get a whole bunch of people on TV, then you get people invested, and Matt Hardy is becoming everything he said he wouldn't become. Again, this is a gimmick change that AEW can do to help promote and help increase the viewership. And also on top of that, Matt Hardy is a big name in wrestling, so all of these guys would get the rub. And whoever dethrones Matt Hardy can obviously become a big deal. Now, when it comes to WWE doing a gimmick change, it goes back to that argument of now they're just doing it for the sake of doing it, and there's no reason, no plan, nothing really involved. There's no thought process behind it. And I think that's a very important conversation to have with AEW, because gimmick changes do happen. People have gone through gimmick changes. We've seen Matt Hardy become broken in AEW, and it didn't work out. And it got a lot of negative feedback. It did. The whole thing with him teleporting, and granted, yes, it was during the pandemic and it was the early stages of AEW, but everybody who knew what the broken gimmick was knew that that stuff was expected. So again, Matt Hardy doesn't need to change his gimmick to, he doesn't need to do it for any other reason than just keep things fresh. You know what I mean? And I think WWE and AEW are two different companies, where WWE is all about their personal pet project. So if you're Roman Reigns, you're Brock Lesnar, you're guaranteed to get that push. You're guaranteed to get that great storyline. You're treated very differently than some of the other talent when it comes to the storylines. And I think Matt Hardy and AEW is basically given an opportunity to say, like, hey, we're not going to make you look bad, but we want more people to be involved to get this rub from being with you, And I think throughout time, AEW has shown us consistently that with a gimmick change or new characters or debuts, there's always a reason for it. See, that's the thing. TNA and WCW had debuts that happened, but there was nothing that came out of it. And whether or not you like the debut of Bryan Danielson or Adam Cole or Ruby Soho, there have been plenty of people on the AEW roster that actually, they actually benefited from it. So I look at this as a really good thing for AEW. Matt Hardy teasing a new gimmick to me is exciting. I would love to see Matt Hardy, we saw the Stadium Stampede thing, and I would love to see more of that from Matt Hardy. I loved watching him with the Elite, and there's a lot of great memories with Matt Hardy in AEW that I think a lot of people forgot about. And I think this could actually lead to more of that. And this time it could lead to more excitement around the talent that maybe aren't as big. Now, keep in mind, since we are talking about gimmick changes, WWE is changing Elias's gimmick, and they don't even know what the hell they're going to do. So I talked about this in the previous video. Like, WWE doesn't have these plans. AEW does. I'm not saying you can't like AEW or you can't like WWE, but it's nice to know that when you're watching a wrestling show, there are plans in place in the long term. Because again, the Rusev Day example was perfect. Aiden English and Rusev and Lana, they got over. And I was in New Orleans for WrestleMania 34, and I was in Bourbon Street, and I remember that experience of everybody chanting Rusev Day, Rusev Day, Rusev Day. Now, Rusev is no longer Rusev. He is Miro, and he's kicking ass. He's a very, very strong performer for AEW. And the cool thing is now we believe to get invested in him because we know AEW has plans long-term for everything that they've been doing. So WWE can change a gimmick, you lose hope. AEW stars can change their gimmick, and you're kind of like curious, what is this going to lead to? What is going to happen out of this? And I think that's one of the reasons why people stick with AEW, especially the young audience. You want to know why the young audience is watching AEW? It's because you can get excited about something. And I'm not saying AEW won't screw this up. They could. It's a possibility. But from a logical standpoint, you can really get excited about what AEW is teasing and what they're changing and what they're leading up to, because going into 2022, AEW has a new TV deal through TBS. So this stuff is important. AEW wants the viewership, and those ratings for TBS will be very interesting to take a look at. And you best believe Matt Hardy changing his gimmick, giving other people the rub, giving them the spotlight, that tells me that there's a plan behind it. Now, should Matt Hardy become the world champion? I think there's 100 other people in AEW I'd rather see become the world champion. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if he can turn into a new gimmick and eventually become a world champion to put somebody else over, I don't have a problem with it. As long as there's something that comes out of it that's good. And that's where I trust AEW. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I know this video was all about the gimmick change, but I felt like it needed a little bit more time versus talking about other news. But yeah, keep in mind, I bring you guys the latest news and rumors. So if you guys want more updates, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Don't forget to check out the Discord link down below, and I'll see you next time. Peace.